Now we've looked at weak verbs and strong verbs, and we've looked at strong nouns, the noun classes that we reviewed so far, starting in lesson 2, I suppose it was, were strong nouns. There are also weak nouns, but you notice that a verb and a noun also is either strong or weak. With adjectives, the adjective is strong or weak depending on its relationship to the noun. So strong is kind of the default adjective set of endings. You only use the weak adjective endings if the adjective is being used together with a specified noun. So specifier being the, this, or that. If I talk about a creek is cool, or a cool creek, I'm using a strong adjective. But if I specify the creek, if I say the cool creek, this cool creek, that cool creek, then the adjective is so-called weak. Since weak adjectives and weak nouns share more or less the same endings, I will review them both in one later lesson. For now, I want to introduce you to the basic strong adjective endings so that you can learn those, because those will also help you learn other things, such as the endings for the definite article, the word the. Alright, so if you use an adjective in Old Norse, it has to agree in gender, number, and case with the noun that it modifies. If you have a noun that is masculine nominative singular, then the adjective must also be masculine nominative singular. But if you've got a noun that's neuter dative plural, the adjective is going to have to be neuter dative plural too. So any adjective has at base 24 different forms that it can come in just in its strong forms, because you've got to have all 4 cases, nominative, accusative, genitive, dative, all 3 genders, masculine, feminine, neuter, and both numbers, singular and plural. Remember that there is no dual in Old Norse outside of just we two and y'all two. Alright, so let's take as our basic example an adjective that's got very typical form and that is inspired by the circumstances of today as I record this. Varmer, warm. Alright, so the endings, I'll start with masculine, as usual, singular, then plural, and nominative, accusative, genitive, dative for the order of the cases I'll be discussing. So our endings are varmer. When we look it up in the dictionary, we're going to find that masculine nominative singular form. Accusative varman, genitive varps, dative varmum. So notice that the U umlaut rule, where an A is turned into a hook O by a U and a following unstressed syllable, applies in adjectives as it does everywhere else in Old Norse. Obviously, you would not do this with an adjective like heitar, hot, where there's no A to turn into a hook O. The reason I'm using varmer as the example is so you get that, that extra reminder about that. Plural, varmir, varma, varmra, vormum. So notice that masculine dative singular and dative plural are the same. Notice that you have a distinct ra ending in the genitive plural that is only with adjectives and some other formats derived from adjectives. And you will have to consider what noun or nouns an adjective is modifying to know what endings to put on it if you're trying to compose Old Norse. And of course I recommend trying to write little bits like we do in the exercises for this class, because that makes it easier to recognize things when you see them in the wild and real readings. Feminine, we have vorm, so no ending, just U umlaut if applicable. Obviously if there is no U umlaut in an adjective like heitar, this form is simply heit with no ending and no change. Varma, varmrar, varmri, varmar, varmar, varmra, vormum. So just like with the third person plural personal pronouns, they are them, notice that you've got the same exact form in the genitive plural and dative plural for all genders. So genitive plural always ends in ra, dative plural always ends in whether it's masculine, feminine, or neuter. That helps. But notice too that you could be deceived by the fact that most masculine strong nouns have a nominative plural that ends in ar. Most feminine strong nouns have a nominative plural that ends in ir, and adjectives are the reversal of that. So you've got ir in the masculine plural and ar in the feminine plural. I'm sorry, but that is how it is. So you have, for example, varmir eldar, warm fires, but if this makes sense at all, well, I can make it make sense. Varmar hallir, warm halls, feminine. So the endings are reversed in the nominative plural from what you'd expect from the strong nouns. And then neuter, singular, varmt, varmt. So always nominative and accusative in the neuter is the same. Varms, vormu. And then plural, vorm, vorm. So of course just you umlaut with no ending. Again, in an adjective like hater, this is just hate, hate. And then varmra vormum, just like it is in the nominative and in the masculine and feminine in the genitive and dative plural. All right, let me pause here for a brief word from my sponsor just for a minute, and then I'll come back and have you do a couple exercises with me, and then I'll give you your adjective vocabulary to start learning. All right, so let's keep going down the temperature scale. See if you can do all of the strong adjective endings for svalr, which means cool. Of course, the far northern islands in Norway, Svalbard, mean cool coast. All right, so pause the video and see if you can do the right endings for svalr. All right, how'd you do? It ought to look like this. Svalr, swallan, swals, swolum, remembering your u umlaut, swallir, swalla, swalra, swolu, svol, swalla, swalrar, swalri, swallar, swallar, swalra, swolum. And then swalt, swalt, swals, swallu, swol, swol, swalra, swolu. Let's do another one moving down the temperature scale again with kaldr, cold. Pause the video and see if you can do the right endings. All right, the endings that you ought to have gotten are kaldr, kaldan, kalts, koldum, kaldir, kalda, kaldra, koldum. Cold, kalda, kaldrar, kaldri, kaldar, kaldar, kaldra, koldum. Kalt. Now, typically in Old Norse, if we have a sequence of 3 consonants in a row, the middle one is going to get dropped. So you will almost always see the spells K-A-L-T. It's not impossible. There's a manuscript out there where somebody writes K-A-L-D-T, but the standard form would be K-A-L-T. 3 consonants in a row, drop the middle one. So cult, cult, cults, which actually violates sort of the rule that I just told you. Drop the middle one unless it's particularly easy to pronounce. It's more or less the rule. Koldu, cold, cold, kaldra. This doesn't have the 3 consonant rule because it's 2 syllables. Koldum. All right. Now here are the adjectives that you ought to learn to begin with. The temperature adjectives. Heter, hot. Varmer, warm. Svallar, cool. And kaldr, cold. And then right in the middle of all those, there's klær, which means pleasant temperature, comfortable. which I guess is different for everybody. Learn aller, all, marger, many, summer, some, for, few. Learn harder, hard. Learn góðar, good. Learn illar, bad or evil. Learn fager, beautiful. I'm going to make a special note about this word in just a moment. Learn ríkar, powerful, sometimes rich, but in Old Norse it tends to have more the sense of powerful in other senses. Like politically powerful. You know, a ríkar konungur, or a powerful king, who is by extension also a wealthy king. That's how it comes to have that meaning. And then learn the adjectives for possession by first and second plural and dual personal pronouns. Vor, our, okkar, our two, uthvar, y'all's, and ykkar, y'all twos. Alright. Now the special note about fager is this. In the adjective fager, beautiful, the ar is actually part of the root. Now, you may notice in a lot of Old Norse versus English words we've already seen, often the main difference between the Old Norse word and the English word is that the Old Norse word and the masculine nominative singular ends in an R that the English word doesn't. So vinter versus when. Okay. But now and then you find English words that are cognate with Old Norse words, and the English word ends in an R too. Now, in those instances, typically that means that the R is part of the root in Old Norse, so the R doesn't disappear when you add the other endings, unlike in most adjectives or nouns, right? With varmer, you go straight to varman, and you take off the R, you don't leave the R there. With fager, the R is part of the root. This is cognate with English fair, so you can see that the English cognate has the R at the ending too. So what you get there is fager, fagran, fagrs, fogrum, fagrir, fagra, fagra, I suppose that would have to be fogrum, fogr, fagra, fagrar, fagri, fagrar, fagrar, fagra, fogrum, fagrt, fagrt, fagrs, fogru, fogr, fogr, fagra, fogrum. So when I indicate and say a vocabulary lesson, or perhaps in the notes on a reading, that an adjective has a root R, what I mean is, like in fager, the R is part of the root and doesn't drop when you add the other endings. Let's also make sure that you can do the endings on the possessive forms of the personal pronouns correctly. Let's do vor. See if you can do the correct, all the correct endings for vor, meaning our. Pause and see if you can do it. All right, let's see how you did. You ought to have gotten vor, vorn. These possessive pronouns have a special form, just N without the AN. Vors, vorum, vorir, vora, vorra, vorum. Vor, vora, vorar, vorri, vorar, vorar, vorra, vorum. Vort, vort, vors, voru, vor, vor, vora, vorum. Alright, so for the rest of this video I'm going to have some slides that have questions to ask you to pause the video and give your answers. You're used to that if you've been doing this with me for the past few lessons. And as usual, if you are on Patreon, feel free to contact me with your questions or needs for clarification or anything like that. For now, from beautiful Colorado, thank you for your Patreon support, and let me wish you all the very best.